All right, the golden years, nutrition in later years. Um, why do you have a chapter on that? Because life expectancy has gone way up. Um, in 19, well, this is pretty much how it was for life expectancy. It pretty much sucked really bad all the way up until like 1900. Life was pretty miserable. It wasn't fun all the way up to 1900. Then things started to get a lot better. And when you look at things like life expectancy or even, um, well, anyway, you'll see how like that things started changing. So um, today, so it went from life expectancy was about 48 years back then, and today it's about 76 years. Right now, it depends on a lot of things, but um, there's a genetic component to it. Right? So there's this idea that we have this thing called apoptosis, this idea that your cells have like a pre-programmed time where they're going to kill themselves. Right? We don't know a whole lot about it, but we know like when it happens and why it happens, and it's one of your body's great ways to defend itself. It's one of the ways that T cells defend themselves, but it's something that happens, and when that happens is largely determined by your genetics. But there is a environmental component too. So how you eat, the type of medical care you get, the type of diet, activity, things like that. So that is the thing that we've been changing a lot since, especially 1980. So, um, so look at. I just like you to look at this at these notes. I wrote this here, this sentence here about 10 years ago, and I was telling you half of adults are overweight. So that's definitely not true. It's today. It's more than 2/3, and in Louisiana, it's a little bit higher, right? So, but being a bit overweight. So notice the BMI here is 27. So we're talking about 25, 26, 27. That's not a whole lot. That's not so bad when you're older. When you're younger, 27 is not that. It's not actually that great. You shouldn't be 27, but when you're 70 and you're 20 BMI of 27, it's like okay, right? But there's some things that we have to be concerned about. And one is I was talking about it in the last lecture, atrophy or sarcopenia, the loss of muscle. So you got to make sure to be getting enough protein, right? So again, each of these 3 chapters, protein, protein, protein. Like I'm pushing protein, but for a different reason. And then they go through some issues. One is dysphagia, right? Having difficulty swallowing, so softer foods might be better. A dentalist, lack of teeth. A lot of people, they might not, they get embarrassed about their teeth, so they don't. They like if they're missing teeth, they might be embarrassed to get it fixed, or they might not want to spend the money at their age to get it fixed, or here's like another thing, like lack of bladder control, right? So how do you respond to that? You cut back on liquids, and you cut back on foods. So, and then sensory loss. At a certain age, a lot of people lose not only their thirst mechanism but their taste. So that it makes a big difference. So I was told after the pandemic, people that couldn't taste stuff, it was like a big deal for them. Older people go through economic changes. They're on a fixed income, and it's not like everybody is on this quote unquote fixed income. A lot of retirees are doing really well, but there's a lot of, there's a good number of people on a serious fixed income, and they're eating, cans of beans. So it's estimated that like about 20% of retirees are like in that bracket where they're like on a really tight fixed income. And what having less money always means, no matter how old you are, is that you're going to get foods that are less nutrient dense. And you always find like younger people saying, oh, well, you don't have to spend a lot of money to eat well. That's not true. You have to spend a lot of money to eat well. And if you're poor, you don't eat as well. And that's all there is to it. So living alone, there's a strong correlation between living alone and having poor eating habits. And that's especially true for men. So actually, there's some studies in women who lose their husbands. I don't know if you call them widows or whatever. Anyway, they tend to put on a little bit of weight. Men who lose their wives tend to they tend to lose weight. Men that lose their wives tend to be less happy. Okay, this is a little. Women that lose their husbands tend to actually make some more friends and be a little bit more social, right? So these social changes are linked to eating. Energy needs. Our energy needs this is like a rough rule. Every decade, it's about a 5% decline. So it's not huge. You're talking about like between the average student, you and me, there's probably like a 300 calorie difference in what we need, right? So nutrient dense foods can easily offset that 300 calorie difference, right? So if I'm eating 300 calories less than you, I can easily offset the nutrients that I'm getting by eating foods that are a little bit more nutrient dense. For some people, you should add fat because the taste, right? You want to get people eating first of all. So you want to make sure that there's enough fat in the diet and there's enough carbs in the diet because you want to use the energy. Remember, proteins, 90% of proteins is used to build things like muscle and hemoglobin, whatever you're making. Only about 10% of it is used for energy. You want to keep it like that. So you want enough of your energy coming from carbs and from carbs and lipids, so that you're not using proteins for energy. You want to use proteins for what they're mostly meant for, building stuff in your body. So definitely you want to reduce sarcopenia. Vitamins. Again, we have vitamin D, and we have calcium, and we have iron. So the vitamins and minerals are the same, but I've added something in here, B12. So B12 is not an issue with intake, it's an issue with having stomach problems. So about up to 30% of older people have what's called atrophic gastritis. And so there's this molecule, if you remember back to the digestive system, there's a molecule called intrinsic factor, and it's made by our stomach. B12 has to be attached to intrinsic factor to be absorbed. So no intrinsic factor, no B12 absorption. So if you have a messed up stomach, you're not making intrinsic factor like you should, therefore the B12 is not getting absorbed by your body. So it's not a supply issue. It's not that you're not getting enough in your food as much as it's that you're not absorbing it enough. And so some people might take something like sublingual B12. So there's that. And then we're back to vitamin D and calcium again. So not going outside enough. Or if they do, they're wearing a lot more clothes, right? But also their kidneys are not as good at, the kidneys are are taking vitamin D and converting it to like an active form. So they're not as good at it as they used to. So, but at the same time, they're not drinking enough. They're not getting enough calcium in their diet. Typically, older people. But the iron needs have changed now because once women go into menopause, it's not an issue. So, but calcium, right? Or antacid use. Antacid uses so people that are just popping antacids, that can interfere with iron absorption. Other nutrition concerns, arthritis. Arthritis is partly, not completely, but related to joint control. Rheumatoid arthritis, which is autoimmune, there's a lot of it's not even a lot of research. There's like an agreement that vitamins C and E help, and omega-3 fatty acids. So you see a lot of people buying fish oil. Right. So the sources for omega-3 fatty acids: oily fish, fish that you don't like, mackerel. Well, salmon you like, right? So salmon, mackerel, flaxseed. You're like, where do I even get it, and how can I even afford it? And then there's some vegetables that are sort of high in omega-3 fatty acids, but the list is not like very big. Um, so, but and then again, C and E might help with cataracts and with macular degeneration. And then again, omega-3 fatty acids. So we got omega-3 fatty acids, we got vitamin C, vitamin E. These are two food assistance programs, and they were developed not so much because people they didn't have money but it was to get them to eat. So Meals on Wheels, a lot of those people, it's not so much that like, oh, thanks for this plate of hot food. I wasn't going to make that for myself. That's true. They weren't going to make it for themselves. So good thing you brought it, but it's that visit, right? So there's a social component, especially when you're older, to eating. So just the visit and the fact that someone brought you food leads to them being more likely to eat the food. So it wasn't it is, there's a latent effect of economics, but it really was like a social issue. And congregate meals, pancake breakfast, whatever it is at the whatever club, that's preferred to eating alone. So there you go. Just like a brief introduction to different nutrition needs at 3 different points in your life.